Grief does not move at the speed of culture. It doesn't fit on a calendar. It doesn't wrap itself neatly around the funeral, and it doesn't comply with everyone else's unspoken deadlines of when you're supposed to be okay again. And yet, in a world that idolizes closure, healing often looks like betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. See, what most people won't say out loud, at least, is that grief makes you feel like an outsider in your own life. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because the world refuses to sit long enough to honor what you've lost. You're left holding memories like sacred stones while everyone else is just rushing past you, talking about their next vacation, their next achievement, their next first. And meanwhile, you're still at the site of your last. And there's a disorienting loneliness that forms when your internal world is cracked wide open, but the external world, it just keeps spinning, pretending that everything is back to normal. And when no one notices that you're still unraveling, or worse, when they do but they act like you shouldn't be, it becomes even harder to find words for what you're feeling. You wonder if you're broken, if you're weak, if maybe you're the one who just can't move on. But the truth is, you're grieving not just a person or a dream or a chapter. You're actually grieving the part of yourself that lived in connection with what's now gone. You're not just mourning what was, you're mourning who you were in relation to it. And that kind of grief doesn't end. It evolves, it deepens, it demands to be integrated and not erased. And what makes grief so heavy isn't just the loss itself, it's the quiet shame that we carry for not grieving the right way. We're praised when we seem strong, when we function, when we return to work with a smile and say, I'm fine, I'm good. But we're subtly punished when we still cry, when we need to talk about it, when we say that we're not ready yet. And then people start avoiding us. Conversations grow shallow and invitations begin to fade, and slowly we begin to lie, not just to others, but also to ourselves about where we really are. And if we want to live with integrity, grief must be named honestly. Because pretending we've moved on, it doesn't just dishonor the loss, it actually also fractures our relationship with truth. And when we sever our honesty in the name of fitting in, we don't actually feel connected anymore. We feel more alone. See, performative healing isolates us, and it's only vulnerable grief that reconnects us again. That's why here in the work that I do at Bintegers, grief isn't something that we want to try fast tracking. We believe that integrity means allowing space for what is still unfinished, still in pain, still vulnerable, and intimacy means letting others witness that process, not after we've healed, but while we're in the middle of healing. And grief doesn't just distort time, it distorts belonging. You start to feel out of sync with everyone else's pace. At the gatherings, for example, you catch yourself zoning out, smiling when you're expected, yes, nodding through conversations, yeah, even though those conversations feel impossibly distant from your internal world that you're carrying still. The laughter feels too loud, and the future-focused talk feels irrelevant. And worst of all, no one seems to notice the silent weight that you're still carrying. And it's not that people are cruel as much as it's that most are just terrified of prolonged pain, especially when it isn't their own. When grief extends beyond the sociable, acceptable lines of time, it becomes inconvenient, right? And in a culture that commodifies attention, inconvenience is exiled, and those who grieve longest are usually the ones who grieve alone. And that's where this fracture begins, because you don't just You don't just feel abandoned by the person or the future you lost, but you also feel abandoned by this community that you thought would have carried you through this season. The isolation begins to compound over time, and slowly the grief becomes less about what was lost and more about what was never held. Now is your story, your sadness, your truth. And in this loneliness, many of us develop this survival mask, right? We become experts at pretending that we're okay. We say we're getting there, and we make to-do lists, and we go back to work, and we post a photo that suggests that we're moving forward. Meanwhile, underneath the surface, we're still feeling raw. We're still reeling. We're still wondering if we're ever going to feel whole again. We wonder, is it supposed to take this long? Or is everyone else just better at faking this? This is this cruel trick of invisibilized grief, if you will. It's not that it just hurts, it also gaslights. Because when no one reflects back your pain, you start to believe that pain itself was illegitimate. And so instead of allowing it room to breathe, you tuck it away and you apologize for its presence. And you try to fold yourself back into a world that no longer seems to fit. But pain doesn't vanish because we hide it, right? It just waits and it festers and it shape-shifts into fatigue and detachment and even depression. See, unprocessed grief doesn't disappear. It migrates. And it will show up in our relationships and in our health and our creativity, our sense of self, until we finally give it permission to be seen. The permission to grieve deeply and slowly and without apology. This is one of the rarest gifts we can offer ourselves and others in the midst of the season, especially in the world that rewards speed over depth. This is why we must create these spaces that honor slowness and celebrate truth and allow that sacred act of mourning to unfold without needing to be marketable or palatable. See, if this message resonates, it's not just for you, it's also for the people around you who don't know how to name their pain yet. It's for the ones who've been stuck in silence. It's for the ones who think that they're broken when they're actually just grieving. This is what I'm trying to build here, like this culture that doesn't just tolerate grief, but holds it together. See, some people are stuck in grief not because they want to be, but because they were never offered a safe place to bring it. Grief isn't just a private problem, it's a communal wound, and when no one steps in to help tend to it, it scabs over unevenly, and we start to make quiet agreements with ourselves saying, don't bring it up anymore, right? Or don't be a downer, or don't make people uncomfortable. And these agreements slowly turn our inner world into a tomb that's sealed from the outside. And what gets buried inside isn't just the pain of the loss. It's also the longing to be understood, the desire to be met in our most fragile of moments, the hope that anyone might just say, you don't need to be okay yet, and I'm not going anywhere. When that hope isn't met, many turn to performance. We tell a tidier version of our story. We say that we're better or we're healing even when we're not. And that performance gets rewarded with praise when people say, you're so strong and you've handled this with such grace, but deep down it feels hollow because performance costs us our truth. And this emotional dissonance between what's felt and what's expressed can make us feel fraudulent in our own healing. And we may even begin to resent others for not seeing through the mask, even though we were the ones who put the mask on. It's a tragic cycle. We hide because we're afraid of being left behind, and in doing so, we guarantee our own isolation. And the cruel irony is that the more we try to catch up to everyone else's pace, the more disconnected we feel, Because grief does not respect deadlines. It doesn't care about social expectations, and it certainly doesn't even resolve itself to just settle because the world keeps spinning. So how do we interrupt this cycle? How do we honor our grief without letting it become our identity? How do we hold space for what still hurts without collapsing into hopelessness? It starts by recognizing that grief isn't just a response to loss. It's a form of love, a stubborn, sacred kind of love that refuses to pretend the absence doesn't matter. And when we try to bypass it, we're not avoiding pain, we're avoiding love in one of the most honest forms. See, at Bintegers, I call this the integrity of sorrow. It's a decision to stay aligned with your truth, even when that truth makes others uncomfortable. It's a quiet rebellion of refusing to numb what still deserves to be felt. And yes, it's terrifying to be the one still grieving when everyone else has moved on. But what if grief isn't a delay in your healing? What if grief is the most honest expression of your humanity? What if it's your slowness that is the most sacred part? Some losses don't fade, they integrate, they settle into the marrow of who you are. And the goal isn't to get over them, it's to live in a way that honors what was lost. But we can't do that if we're constantly pretending that we've moved on. We can't integrate what we have not acknowledged yet. The world will keep rushing forward, yes, but grief moves at the speed of meaning. And when meaning isn't allowed to form, when stories go untold, when sorrow isn't witnessed, we end up carrying this invisible weight that shapes our entire way of being. Our patience begins to thin. Our joy dulls. Our capacity for connection erodes. But when we stop pretending, something beautiful begins to happen. And that's the grief doesn't get smaller, but it becomes more spacious. It finds its breath. It finds its rhythm. And slowly, like, we stop racing against it, and instead we start walking with it. And here's the transformative truth. Grief carried with integrity becomes a bridge, not back to ourselves only, but also to others. Because when we grieve honestly, we're giving others permission to do the same. We become the safe presence that we longed for. We break the silence that we once were suffering in. So if you're still grieving while everyone else seems to have been thriving, you're not behind. You're just in process. You're honoring the weight of your story in a world that rushes past it. And that is not a weakness. That is a strength of one of the rarest kinds. And maybe your slowness is the exact pace that's needed to teach the rest of us how to experience our humanity again. That's the soul of this work here at Bintegers. Not fixing pain, but honoring it. Not rushing through it, but witnessing it with integrity and intimacy. Because I believe the loneliest parts of us don't need to be silenced. They need to be seen. And if you found yourself moved by this episode, I want you to know this. You're not alone in slowness. You're still here, and I'm here walking alongside you. So as I close out this month's series, we're already preparing for next month's deep dive. It's called Virtue or Vice, when good traits go too far. And it'll be a timely, potent exploration into the dark side of our best intentions and how integrity and intimacy can help us course correct when our strengths begin to sabotage us. Also, if you're one of the many who responded to my episode on ghosting, you'll be glad to hear this. I'm actually launching a special free course on my website on ghosting. It'll be up soon. And I'm going to take that conversation even deeper with tools and frameworks and healing and pathways for both those who ghost and those who have been ghosted. So, because the thing is, our silences and our stories matter. So, thank you for staying with me through this journey. Let me know in the comments how this episode impacted you, and I'll see you in the next episode.